There's this guy. He's a writer. He's doing a documentary, and he is over at one of the contemporary times now. I'm not making this up. It's present day, and he is in a particular country I will not name. It's not necessary, but it's one of the lesser developed countries vis-a-vis the United States, for instance, or Western Europe, which was where the man was from, one of the two. And he's interviewing these people, and they have been undergoing periodic attempts at so-called democratization of the overthrow of what seems to be one man, one party rule, economic straitjackets on the people. All this is from the writer's view, a Western nervous system man. He goes there and he is impressed by the people. In the documentary, or the written piece, whichever one it was, goes like this, the part that I wanted to get you to notice. He fawns over these people. Nothing absolutely new. It is represented again. I might point out I'm trying to drag you into a more specific direction with this kind of thing I point out that's been going on for thousands of years. The good old Rousseau type of noble savage syndrome. It's a piece of that, but I'm going to try and drag you into a different part of the universe with it. This Western documentary maker fawns over the people. They in turn begin to immediately fawn not just over him, but over his t-shirt, his Levi's, his Swatch watch, his transistor, some tapes he had laying around. He had in his pocket JB and Blue Rodeo and people in his pocket. He then turns on these people and begins to insist, and this is very serious now. The guy that was doing this, the guy was intellectual, sophisticated, had the wherewithal that somebody financed this, made a film out of it, paid his way over there. He seriously begins to talk to these people, and it goes like this, the song. The ditty is, look, you people have something. Do not get impressed by Western materialism. Don't do that. He's trying to put them off like, never mind the t-shirt and all this stuff. No. He says, if you fall for what we've done in the West, if you fall for simply trying to obtain material goods, wealth, and comfort, you will not have progressed. And these people stand, they look. They hear the words. He says, the pursuit of mere physical comfort and material wealth, materialism in toto, will lead to social decay, the absolute destruction of the human spirit, of civilization, of what you people have. And they look. They're underfed, they're underpowered, underemployed. But you do hear me, because you know by now, I'm not talking about some documentary phony baloney scene that I made up. This one actually happened, but I might as well have made it up. We're talking about inside of your own human nervous system. But if you insist, I'll continue to play like and pretend that I'm talking about this documentary. He tells the people, do not fall for what has happened to us. We have here a more advanced, in the three-dimensional visible world, we have a more advanced nervous system. All of you by now surely know what I mean, but you people out there on tape getting this another time in another place, it is not a quality judgment on people. Even if I carry on this facade for a few minutes longer, then I'm actually talking in some serious manner about something that happened externally. It is not a qualitative judgment genetically on people or otherwise. It is simply that is the same way as inside of an individual, inside of one state, one nation, one group of people, inside the planet Earth, inside of the life and the body of life itself, there are staggered degrees of growth. There are more advanced nervous systems on this planet right now and less advanced. Don't let that throw you. If you If anybody out there on tape believes that that has anything to do with any sort of serious matter that should not be spoken of, then you're probably wasting your time here, because people can admit, they can see that there are more advanced technological societies and less advanced, more and less advanced. So we have the man representing a more advanced, not just education, it's not just anything. He is from a part of the world where, in general, the people's nervous system are more advanced than this less advanced society that he is visiting and attempting to fawn over. So take him as being representation of a more developed nervous system, that the area of the brain itself is more operational, has more influence on the operations of him and his group, his country, his nation, where he came from, than it does in the person that he's talking to. So we have a more advanced, a more developed, just take it mechanically, it's nobody's right to take any credit for this situation out in the ordinary world. But we have a man with a more advanced nervous system. He is more operating from the brain area, the speak area of his own nervous system, than this man that he is speaking to. He is telling this less advanced nervous system what is best for him. And what he is saying is this: do not be like I am. What the fuck gives? What is life doing? How are things so arranged that the more advanced nervous system is saying, do not fall for this despicable trap of merely pursuing materialism and physical comfort at the sake of your own soul, or some such. How else in the visible world are you going to measure progress? Now, none of you have ever put it that way, but I'm sure most of you that even cursorily attracted to such as this have been through some stage of this, some moment of this in your life, whether you actually did it to another human. You found some book. You're reading about Tibet or India and wishing you were there and thinking, these people have held on to that more basic, enlightened attitude. If you go there, they would swap their sister. They'd give you all the holy books they got for a pair of Levi's. And then your nervous system would want to say, if you were still as archetypical as this guy that I'm talking about, this documentary maker, you would say, no, don't lose this which is precious that you now have simply for the sake of material goods and physical comfort. That is not progress. Now back to reminding you people out there on tape one more time, this is not Sociology 101. It's not Sociology 1001. How else in the ordinary world is progress to be measured? Now, if I had not asked it that way, if I had not set it up this way, and you were ordinary intelligence, you might have a reply to that. But the reply would have been the very thing that they are seeking to escape. You wouldn't have put it that way. You would have tried to put it in a more positive way. But to someone less advanced. Now let's go back and pretend that we're talking about the actually the physical world. How are they going to gauge progress? That this guy flew in on a 747, drove up in a rented limo, or at least a Mercedes, wearing these clothes, and he tells them, oh, you precious little darlings, you, whatever you do, don't fall for the same claptrap that we did in my country and simply got there and pursue physical comfort and advanced technology and lose what you got. And they think, lose what have we got? You mean lose our hunger, lose sleeping out in the rain and the cold, having our sewage run down in the street? You know, don't give that up. You want that? And their thing is, well, hey, let's swap places. You can come over here and you can have it, and I'll run the risk of ruin, and I'll go back over and take your place. Now, I don't mind, I'll do it for you because I like you. You would have never looked at it in that manner, but I ask you one more time, too many of you missed it. Don't take this as too much of a, don't get entrapped with the dressing I'm putting on it, of making the actual example. But how else can you measure any kind of progress in the visible human world? And yet people would want to argue that no, there's more things. It doesn't matter. And you don't have to go to another country now. There are people right here. There are people in their indigenous territory, wherever right here was, wherever you happen to be hearing this. There are people right there that would say, we are on the wrong track. What we're doing, me out there working 2 jobs to try and buy a brand new BMW, that's not progress. I'm hurting myself. I'm cheating my life. That is not progress. And they mean it. Life makes them mean it. But if they could turn on themselves and play this kind of scenario out that I attempt at times to do for you, me playing part of you, if they could do it to themselves and they say, all right, wait a minute. I've always taken that. I believe it meant something. I even been saving my money to travel and live with some guru in India or some commune over in China, in Africa. And I'm thinking that that's going to be progress, but what kind of progress? What is it I'm dreaming of when I'm denouncing material progress? What other kind of progress? What am I looking for? Things are not wired up for people to ask that, because they did, and they thought, all right, if I go there, what will I gain? Well, I'll lose air conditioning, I won't have a car, there won't be any rapid transit, there won't be any TV, blah, blah, blah. And of course, they can selectively pick out somebody and say, well, I don't like TV anyway, or my car costs too much. Never mind all that. How are you going to, in the ordinary world, how are you at all going to gauge progress under any kind of definition? There is only one. That which is visible. The human intellect is not wired up in any other way, and that's wired up generally that life makes people believe, that is, life makes people have periodic thoughts that there is some other kind of progress available. That's the only reason churches are still in business, although most of them do all their business 1 day a week. But they're still in business on the basis, but if you ask people going into church, if you had more intellectual people still going to church seriously, and you ask them, what are you going here for? You know, it's for some benefit, right? And they'd say, yeah. That you want to progress along certain lines, yeah. And it's obviously you're not going there to help yourself and your community and your position in the business world, unless, of course, you're an Episcopalian. And they'd say, no, I'm not. And you'd say, well, why are you there? And then they'd have to go, well, and then they've got to lapse into fairyland. They've got to say, well, I want to go to heaven when I die. I want to go to paradise. I want to be a good person. I don't want the gods to be angry at me. They cannot. It satisfies no one. That's why you can't really ask somebody what religion's about. And it's not just religion. You could ask them about if somebody was insisting that they were pursuing some philosophy of life that they'd picked up from some psychologist or some book. And you ask them, well, exactly what do you expect to gain from this? What will be the progress? What will be the benefit? And if they say, well, I expect to feel better. No. You know, everybody expects to feel better. Take a damn drink. Most people feel better for a minute. What is it you actually expect to get? I mean, like the fools that you're denouncing. People that guy working 2 jobs, and you say, why are you working 2 jobs? He'll say, I'll tell you the truth. All my life I have wanted a Corvette. And I'm going to get one if I have to work 3 jobs. That's what he's after. What are you after doing this? Nobody can say. And I'm telling you why they can't say. It's just never been pushed to that point. There is no way that ordinary intelligence in the ordinary world, which of course where it has its domain, can measure, can think about any kind of progress except material progress. And yet life is arranged so that those that apparently, from many views and many quarters, have some sort of, at least burgeoning, superior intellect, they're the ones that continually want to stand up throughout history and denounce materialism. That's going to be our downfall. But life is not arranged for somebody of equal apparent intelligence to stand up and say, all right, I hear you. Then what is? And then begin to mumble in their beard about some kind of spiritual work or trying to refine our spirit and something. And you holler, and the guy say, speak up, be a little more specific. I mean, what? If we can identify the enemy, that is, the Philistines out working real hard, trying to, this guy started a record company, and all he wants to do is make money. He doesn't care. And that's what we're attacking. That's what you're attacking. The guy says, well, yeah. All right, now let's pick out somebody, the kinds of artists that want to be recorded, the people that want to show up. Now, they're not money hungry, little greedy grubbers, right? The guy said, well, no, not if they're real artists. All right, what are they after? Fulfillment. There is no way to gauge, there is no way to make any mark anywhere of anything that satisfies anyone's intellect in the ordinary world of progress unless it's visible. Now, I ask you again, to what possible end is life wired up that this kind of dichotomous tug-of-war has been going on for thousands of years, and the situation I just named you just happened 2 or 3 days ago, or at least I was aware of it. Brand new. And this guy was pleading with these people, don't fall for this. Don't fall for this. And he keeps having to look at his watch to see what time it is, that the film's going. He's got to get on a plane and come back and start editing this film and probably do some more dealings trying to make sure that he's still got his Rockefeller grant so that this thing will be shown on TV. And he's telling these people that he's sincere. Well, you know what sincerity means out in the ordinary world. You know, it means when you die you may go to Hollywood or somewhere. But at any rate, that's the way life is. But he is being sincere. And you people who are laughing, of course, are not laughing at this guy that I saw. You're laughing at you having that same kind of energy running through your nervous system at times. That's why you hear it. It is a laugh of recognition, as always, because if you didn't recognize it, you couldn't laugh. But the guy, life has made these people look at these little less fortunate people. And he wants to hug their little face, and tears come in his eyes. He said, don't fall for this. And he is, if he didn't say it specifically, he is tacitly all over the place saying, what you've got is precious. Don't fall for it. The world's becoming so small. I see what you people are doing. I know you. As soon as I got here, you started asking me about my Levi's and my watch. Don't do this, people. Don't do this. You're pursuing false gods of materialism. And if they tried to play along with this and went, all right, we hear you. We hear what you're saying, so what is it we should pursue? If they ask him now, what would he say? Now, not just after cheap laughs here. And you shouldn't be falling for just cheap laughs. Not that I'm causing it. But it's not just something funny. Something is afoot that you never recognize. And if they say, all right, we hear what you're saying. We never thought about it, but you come from there. To us, it's a dream world. Now, you're from there. And you're saying, don't do it. That it is not progress. It is not beneficial. So, what should we be pursuing? What's he going to tell them? What are they going to tell themselves? What is the alternatives? You attracted us. Our dreams have been, if we could just get somehow to America, or to Belgium, or to Italy. If we could just get there. And now you're from there and you say, no, no, no. Don't do that. It will not be progress. It will not be evolution. It will be involution. All right, so if we don't do that and we stay here, what is it we should be after? What are they going to think? All right. Instead of just being hungry a lot, we should maybe get real hungry. Instead of just having to live out in the mud, maybe we should all get together and maybe try and run some water down from the river and even make the place sloppier. Maybe we should ask tourists to be sure and come over and use the restroom here in my backyard so it's not just us. What is left? What does he think he means? What is it that in some part of life's body it is making humans continue to think about that you still have this tug-of-war going on internally within the life of man, within each individual? Just most people are never aware of this because this goes on in your nervous system. The lower parts of your nervous system listen, because the lower they are down, you should know by now, the less they have to say, the less they are inclined to verbalize. But they are hearing from up here, from a more advanced part of the nervous system. They're hearing from this documentary, this filmmaker. He's saying, oh, you precious little dears down there, don't let happen to you what happened to me. And they think, what happened to you? Because as far as they're concerned, you are the living role model. You are paradise on 2 legs. And yet this, that seems to be that which should be desirable, is saying, no, no, no. No. What gives? It is not just a rhetorical question, because this is part of the balancing mechanism that keeps people from actually doing anything out of the ordinary. It's not necessarily you ever thought about this, not necessarily you'd ever heard the term noble savage, or not necessarily that you believe that this actual scenario took place that I just related, because you have been going through it. there is a part of the human nervous system that is generally wired up in most people that the more advanced, just in the mechanical sense, just in the general overall evolutionary sense of the human nervous system, humanity, that the higher parts of it periodically, it's a constant thing, but they periodically and spasmodically, here and there, enough to be noticed, enough for me to bring it up, enough for me to tell you that it has an influence on you, that these higher parts are saying, I see you guys down there, I see you thoughts, I see you operations of my own nervous system looking at me enviously up here. It's ill-founded. Save your admiration. Don't fall for this. It is a balancing mechanism amongst other things. Well, I'm using this kind of example of this documentary filmmaker and this less advanced group that he goes to, with whom he has a certain kind of fascination, or for whom he does, and he has this caveat of telling them, don't be like me, this isn't progress. And then life being wired up in such a way that that aspect of human intelligence, represented by this guy, is never confronted with the direct question about, all right, what is? If you're not, what is? Now, I've already answered to you. You can look for your own exceptions as always. There are none. In the visible world, there is no way to gauge. There is no way that anybody can come up with anything that approaches a satisfactory response to what is progress, except that which is material. And I am fully aware of what's going on, that human nervous systems, life makes a kind of background noise, a kind of sub-Greek chorus is all the time back there somewhere saying, yeah, but that's not real progress. That's not real progress. Something's lacking. All right, I grant you something's lacking in everybody. But they say the problem is that you're going in the wrong direction, that material progress, being more material and physically comfortable, technology is not progress. Okay, what is? It is. At the visible 3D level, that's the only way you can talk about progress of any kind. Notwithstanding and not discounting that 2 blocks removed of this Greek chorus going, whining, no, it's not, no, it's not. I was going to point out, using still as this an example, is a peoples. And you can take peoples, you can call it states, and then you can look at for areas in an individual nervous system. I guess it's according to how quick you are tonight, whether you think I'm actually talking about an interlude between this visitor from a more advanced area into a country of less advanced people, or whether I am talking about inside your own nervous system. Do the best you can. What's your choice? Don't think about it. If there is a choice in your case, don't even consider it, other than do the best you can. What seems to be the people's popular art represents always, in a very specific way, the level of their evolution. I know that even sociologically and psychologically and in other ways, I'm sure that people have tried to point this out, and it's been talked about out in the ordinary world, but it has a deeper, more complex impact and influence on people that's not noticed. It's right before you is one of the things that is so obvious. But consider what I wanted to specifically point you to is consider it in the area of me using that ad hoc description of there being primary interests and activities available to man, and those that are, as I call them, secondary, that are not, from one quite materialistic view, activities, interests that are not absolutely necessary to keep the human organism, an individual organism, alive. The arts. I won't ask you a rhetorical question. I'll just go ahead and point out the arts, based upon my arbitrary and artificial and temporary description of there being primary and secondary activities available to man, the arts would have to fall into the latter category. That a person can be artistically blind, or we can go back to my description, somebody can be in a coma and go ahead and live. Somebody can be with an IQ approaching that of either an asphalt highway or a city councilman, That music sounds like nothing. Art is just people wasting perfectly good paint. That sculpture, who needs to look at that when you can go, see a topless dancer in person? The point is, the arts, from my artificial description, which is not in a more complex universe, loses its validity, but right here in the visible world, the arts would be a secondary activity. But the arts represent any group of people, including the individual, their evolution vis-a-vis their activities, their intrigue, their involvement in secondary activities, as opposed to, or in combination with, primary interest and activities. You have groups of people and you have an individual whose interest would be in the whole production of their society or their group, their tribe, their family, or the individual. Let's say the song, every song that they do is about sex. Even if the word sex is never said, they're talking about sex. In other words, a primary activity. I cannot think of offhand, having my limited cultural background, I cannot think of any continuing area of songsmithing being done about eating, and very few about housing. But nonetheless, you have an area that people all over the world sing about, and some groups of people, that's about all they sing about. And then you have groups of people that are in more, instead of the performing arts, the plastic arts, paintings, let us say. And the paintings are continually about negative emotions. They're continually, no matter what their label, they can be even abstract. And find you an abstract, a non-representational critic, and he will explain it for you that, yes, this obviously, and then he will give you a description of how this represents some of the deeper rooted feelings of depression and fear and loathing in the human spirit. That this group, that their art, their plastics, continually detail and reflect their evolutionary place, being that they are still fighting what seems to be demons in the limbic system. That their emotions, they're still not prepared to be fully integrated into an intellectual world. The question I was going to present to you, if you followed into that, which we don't have time tonight for me to go back and bash on it very much, but the question I was going to ask you, what would reflect a more advanced, in the artistic sense, in the artistic field, what would reflect, what would you imagine would be there, what would you see, hear, experience in a more advanced intellectual society? What would be their popular art? All right, I'll answer for you. You don't know. Try and imagine it. Take a second. All right, you can't. Well, some of you can get close. Besides me speaking even exemplary of external groups of people, notice, if you are the person properly attracted to such as this, you're carrying around knowingly, eventually, knowingly the full genetic history of man. And if you'll notice in you, there are times, you would call them moods if you're an ordinary person, but if you're an ordinary person, you ought to slap your face anyway, that you seem to be in certain moods, and all you want to hear are songs. And all you want to hear are particular kinds of songs. Where is that country station? Nobody's around to know I turned it on. Or where's that favorite album of mine? Well, Bob Dylan tries to sing the blues. At any rate, to hear, put on a record, and to listen to music that is singing about sex in a negative sense. Normally lost love. Or it could be, if you were wired up just a little differently and you weren't that popularly musically inclined, as I hate to say it, but put on some Wagner and get the blues in a slightly skewed manner with a certain spin on it. You could do that, but there are other times in your life and you may not be interested in the arts, but it's visually. Now, not orally, but visually, you'll begin to try and pick up a magazine of some kind, or you'll look for a book that you had, or you'll turn on TV, and you will keep flipping through until you hit a movie, a show that represents you being almost a nation, a tribe of people right at that time, and your interest. That is, you're producing the art by turning on that TV show. You get the channel, you might as well call it your particular performing art. You're doing it, you're watching it, you're participating in it, if indeed you're actually watching it and enjoying it, as they call it. If you're doing it, then, in a sense, you are painting that, you're writing that. Look at what it is. This is not worthy of any kind of great investigation on your part. You just simply be aware of the fact. At times you will sit there and just turn on the TV and maybe think I don't know what I'm looking for. But at times you will leave on some situation comedy that you might sit there and some of the inner voices in your own dialogue say, I notice they still got 12-year-olds writing this stuff. And then some other night you flip through the channels and it hits one of those shows and you lay the remote down and you sit right there and watch it. That is, you sit right there and you help produce that piece of art. It is a reflection of where your evolutionary level is at that moment. Can anyone find an evolutionary moment in the history of man free from the primary level? Put it to you another way, can you find any of the popular arts, the arts? Can you find them being reflective of anything that would be solely a secondary interest or activity? Ask you another one. Can you in any way conceive of how you might judge the evolutionary growth of one human nervous system or all human nervous systems by secondary activities? All right, the last one. If not, or with all, could you perceive of how they might be judged on the basis of primary activities? If you found this group of people somewhere and they were big on music, music was their primary art, and you listen, and all the songs, well, they had a few in praise of the king. You always got to have that, the chief or the tribe. You got to know that by now. Kind of throwaway material to the gods. But after that, you find out that all of the music that they did when they were not paying homage to the king and on the day of the week or the month that they tried to be religious, the rest of the time they're getting down, having some kind of secondary fun, then their music is all about sex. What would that tell you about their level? Regardless of whether you enjoyed the music, regardless of whether it was interesting, that all of their art, their primary art in this case was music, and primarily all of their primary art, music in this case, was about sex. Or it could be about food. I got a small laugh saying I couldn't think of much about food, but there would be places in the world, they'd be hard to find now if they still exist, but there have been places, now that I've said it, that they would be doing some singing about food. It would still almost be religious. It would be people that were constantly under the threat of starvation and hunger, and they would be singing to a primary need. Food is almost as though it were a god, like, please, some food fly down. But if you found them singing about sex, you do not need an anthropologist with you. You do not need to go away and scratch your head. If you found that your interest at some particular time, for a long period of time, for months, for weeks, whatever it was interested in a certain specific area of arts, whether you thought about it as being arts or not. If it's a secondary activity, it's arts. If it's a secondary reflection of something primary, it's art. And you find yourself looking, listening, being attracted to a specific kind of art, there is your evolutionary level right then. This is not so that you can make up some chart and think, well, I was fairly intelligent last Thursday and etc. The reason I'm doing this is because the part of your nervous system inside the dialogue condemns and criticizes and argues constantly about where you are. That is, it didn't call it that, but about what you're doing. That there you sit watching Three's Company or whatever it is, and suddenly somebody unexpectedly walks in the room and you almost break your leg or arm trying to grab the remote and get it off before somebody walks in and see you watching that. I mean, see you sitting there watching it and going, ha, 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 and thinking, no. Why? Life is wired up. Life is wired up. If I got to remind you again. So, that parts of the nervous system from other areas that are more advanced come and visit these other areas and fall into a kind of noble savage swamp syndrome. Not a mistake, not an error. Life is up to something. But it does that, but simultaneously then condemns itself, which is represented by, as I started out with, these less advanced people saying, all right, you say not to be like you and not to follow what seems to be progress in your part of the world. That is your part of the nervous system. So what's our alternative? The alternative is to suffer. Not just physically, but to suffer over the guy saying, well, you shouldn't be like me. Is that not? He could be saying you shouldn't be like the West. You shouldn't be like more advanced industrial countries. But what he is saying is don't be like me. What is that if it is not the epitome of self-condemnation? When you're flying in the face of all that is rational in the three-dimensional world, to say don't be like we are, don't be like us more advanced people. If you're going to advance in life, don't be like more advanced people. And they go, yeah, got it. You know. We'll be sure and write that down because that makes all the sense in the world. It's good that people like you come from more advanced areas to help enlighten us on these matters. I got to turn the tape over. We rolling? We back? Let's see if I can pull your attention to another area. More primitive people do not dream of freedom. And I hit that on the verbal run last time we were taping. But when you are referring to a more primitive people, and remember this could be a more primitive area in you, hint, hint, but more primitive people do not dream of freedom. They do not. And this is true in what appears to be the external material world. If we were talking about, let's not necessarily use my last example of that documentary film man, because he was in an area that literally is getting closer to his homeland. They were just undergoing the kind of fits and starts of change taking place. But in areas of the world that would absolutely qualify right now as fairly stably primitive, they do not dream of freedom, which, as I made a small mention of last time, but some of you might find it of some interest again, is what's going on externally that seems to confound even routinely intelligent people out there. It confounds them to go to places and find that they have no concept. They don't even have a word that means democracy or freedom. And they live under the obviously tyrannical rule of this one big old fat guy that says that he's been king of the tribe, and his father and his grandfather, and they all bring him half of what they make every year. They bring over their youngest daughter, and nobody complains. Don't they realize it's only him and 2 or 3 of his in-laws? It seemed the other ones that got any big spears. And there's about 100 of these people hanging around. They could kill him anytime they wanted to. All they need is somebody like me from a more advanced part of the world to come over there and point out, you people don't have to put up with this crap. And they go, what crap? They do not even dream of freedom. I want you to understand it is always a relative matter in the visible world. But down to the level I'm talking about of the primitive, the less advanced, they can't even dream. They do not dream of freedom. What could this possibly mean to you if you were actually you? If you were the kind of you that I was actually addressing? What could this possibly mean of any particular benefit? Well, let's try the good old other method, other approach. Let me give you another one. Put down next to The primitive don't dream of freedom. I'll give you another one to go with that. The really captured have no opposition. Let me tell you what the really captured is. There's a very crude, shallow, spasmodic awareness of this in the old world. Somebody really captured, let us say that you were captured in a war out in the ordinary world. You were a group of people, but those, if they're really captured, if their captors knew what to do, and it happens sometimes accidental in life, sometimes it happens inside the area of one state with incarcerations, but those really captured have no opposition. That if it becomes like this, that you are so captured for whatever reason, that they tricked you, they brainwashed you, they beat you in such a way, they made you dependent upon them, or you just wired up that you just love to dance backwards anyway. And you just love guys in big old black leather jackets and big old billy clubs that might slap you around, let's say. That you've turned out to be just delighted to be there in their prison. You're just delighted. That is what I am trying to get you to think about as being really captured. When that happens, your captors can relax. Your captors can become friendly. Your captors can cease to carry the billy club when they're around you. They can turn their back on you. They can leave the door open. To be really captured, they can leave the door open and you're not going anywhere. They're going to have a hard time, if the day ever comes they decide to turn you loose, of getting you to leave. That's really captured. Does anybody even imagine in any way that that has any application to an individual person's nervous system? If you are really captured, you cease to struggle, which would have been perhaps a more simplistic way to start this. But you no longer have any opposition. You no longer actually have a foe. Those or that or the system that apparently is your captor is no longer your foe. You and the foe are now one. You and your captors are now one, and with complete impunity they can cease to aggressively, visibly act as your opposition, as your foe, as your captor. I was pointing out to you last time of life being such a non-Periel ventriloquist, master of legerdemain. Life is also this. Life runs, I'm just going to say, don't take this in any specific sense. Words, remember, just to temporarily turn energy into matter so we can talk. But life is the El Supremo penal system. Life is a warden that you wouldn't believe. Life is a jailer that just gives a whole new, delightful definition to that wonderful term. If there was any need to, what I was going to, if it may help a little bit for you to try and look at this direction, I was saying it's happened sometimes accidentally in life, but if in some way life wanted me or someone to fool around with it, which it doesn't in this sense, but if you follow what I'm going to say, if people knew how to do it, it is possible that prisons, and some of it happens anyway, as part of the mechanical, natural flow of things, but if they actually know what they're doing, you could take the locks off prisons, you could take the weapons away from the guards, you can turn people into totally captive. It is not that difficult. And it does happen sometimes. It happens in the prisons within one society. It also happens when it seems to be two opposing factors, like there has been a conflict between two states, two peoples. And they come up with prisoners of war. And they find out later that the prisoners of war, that their captors used to leave the doors open. And sometimes the captors would go off for the weekend. And the home people, once this is found out, the military, the politicians go, Jesus, what did they do to our people? And they come up with terms like brainwashing. They can't believe that this actually happened. This had to be that they drugged them. They tortured them so much. You don't really have to do that. It's a matter of knowing how to dance. You got to get all these people who are your captives in jail, your prisoners of war. You got to make them understand that the only way they're going to be able to dance and stay alive is to dance backwards. And if it weren't for you, they couldn't even do that. You make them dependent upon you. And if they accept this dependence, which you can without any great difficulty make almost everybody do that, then they no longer see you as the opposition. They see you, in fact, as their savior. Not their captor, not their jailer, certainly not their opposition. And there they sit, can't leave, away from home. You've taken away what they call their freedom, and they look at you certainly in no way as the opposition. Now, away from our great and the great wonderful world of prisons and wars, that doesn't sound familiar to you at all? That you have these periodic bouts inside of your own nervous system that, oh, it seems to threaten a riot. Such things as, I want to be me. I want to be free. I want to let it all hang out. I want to get out and write my songs, paint my paintings, do my graffiti on the walls, write my books, think my great thoughts. I want to do that. Well, why don't you, sir? Well, you know the kind of problems that holds back real artists or real thinking people. The truth is, from a more complex view, you could say, hey, they left the door open. From even a more complex view, you could say, you're not in jail. In some way, you've almost been hypnotized. Life has thrown its voice in a material way, and through ventriloquism, not only has made you think that you hear sounds coming from places they don't, that it's not actually Lester talking, it's Willie Tyler sitting over here making Lester talk. There's no actual prison that you're in that keeps you from doing your own thing. It's not even there. It's ventriloquism. You no longer see it as the opposition. It's just the feeling life has wired in that, well, you can't do that. Whatever it is, I want to do it, but it's obvious you can't do it. Not exactly like I want to do it, or you can't do it whenever I want to do it, or you can't do it right now. It has turned out that you have a friendly jailer. As long as you are operating on that basis, you are totally captured. You are a run-of-the-mill, middle-class, right in the heart of the bell curve human. But remember, the more primitive do not even dream of freedom. When you're totally captive, the last thing I wanted to mention about this for tonight, when you have accepted, of course you didn't choose to, but now I'm trying to rub your nose up close to it, once you begin to sense that you're a kind of captive, not in the sense that you have been captured and exiled from your natural, native, noble, savage home, and that some way the evil forces of the universe or of your subconscious mind has pulled you to some despicable, less than honorable place. It's that you're human. It's that you're inside of a living organism. When you do realize that, when you can get some concept of the fact that when you are totally captured, that you have no opposition, then you've got to realize this almost coevally. On the West Coast, that's simultaneously. But you got to realize this: without opposition, you can't get anywhere. Without opposition, you can't even push your way away from the dock and get away from Barcelona and sail to the New World. You cannot move. You cannot try to escape if you have no opposition. If you and the jailer have now become buddies, how are you ever going to hit him in the head? How are you going to holler, hey, your shoe's untied, when he bends over, kick him in the you-know-what? Hit him with a bucket. How are you going to do that when now you're friends? That is, don't choke on me saying now you're friends, when you now do not perceive that you have any opposition. That if some sort of spooky genie flew up and said, hey, the guy that turned his back, the guy that normally stands here by the door, yeah, he turned his back, now's the chance to leave. Because if he didn't see, he won't get you. You think, well, he wouldn't get me anyway. He's not my enemy. He won't try to move. You can't move is the point. If there is not even the intellectual concept of there being opposition, you won't try to move. Now life has wired things up so that people continue to rail and rant along the lines of I want to be me and let it all hang out. They do that. They curse injustice. They holler that they want to be better people, and your forefathers used to holler that they wanted to be more spiritual and religious. They holler all that. And of course the tacit part of the holler is I want to do that, but I can't because of the opposition, because of my jailers, because of Satan, of opposition, of the more disgraceful parts of human nature. Life makes people do that verbally, but it also, if you begin to see this, makes everyone is almost wired up generally to be totally captive. They don't really dream of freedom. You have got to be more advanced. And don't worry about more advanced than who. You got to be more advanced than you to properly even dream of freedom. The rest of it is not a dream of freedom. The rest of it is just thrashing about there in the cell. You and everybody else. Sometimes you holler, I want out. And sometimes somebody can say, well, why don't you come on out? The door's open. And you go, what door? Why don't you escape? I don't know what escape means. But then again, some other night you holler, let me out of here, let me out of here. "14 minutes. 14 minutes is a lifetime. I guess it's a lifetime if you're a 12-minute fly. So we'll do it on the fly. Give you another Friday law. The more complex it is, the more alive it is. Which is what we're talking about tonight. Well, of course, it's what I'm talking about. I was just trying to be at least magnanimous, if not regal, and say what we are talking about. The more primitive are less alive. We'll go back again, since some of you seem to enjoy this. Well, hell, everybody enjoys it sometimes. We may be talking about things out there, which they always fit, or you'll be talking about things in here, because they wouldn't fit if they didn't fit out there. If it's more complex, it's more alive. This is true if we were talking about an amoeba and a man. An amoeba is certainly alive. I mean, surely even the least of you would not be intellectually primitive enough that you found any reason to poke criticism at an amoeba. It's alive. But it is not as alive in a quite real sense now. Now, it's very important. There's no doubt about it. If the amoeba populations were gone, the bacterial populations were gone, we'd be goners. Now, you all know that. But in a quite real sense, it is not normally taken into consideration because it serves no purpose in the general population. But it is true in a quite real sense that the more complex it is, the more alive it is. That a man, an individual man, is more alive than an amoeba. This is also true if we were talking about, back to what would seem to be my kind of anthropological opening examples, if we were talking about a small family tribe somewhere, it was still extant. I guess there are a few around somewhere. We're in a less developed area of this planet. A little group of people, 10, 12, 15 people, it doesn't matter, but they're all mostly intermarried and they just live by themselves. They are not as alive as the Netherlands. It's Turkey, Bulgaria even, Alabama. This small group of people is not, the group is not as alive as a larger group of people. What is it to be more complex? Well, it's certainly not to be an unthinking critic, a naysayer of the very thing that ordinary people, that the ordinary world, the only gauge it has of progress, which is physical comfort, technological advancement, materialism. A more complex life from any ordinary view cannot be a critic of, cannot be in opposition of this kind of pejorative battle cry of materialism. I understand the basis of that, and by now you should have some understanding, because I will again acknowledge that I have no doubt, knowing how things are arranged, that anyone involved with this, anyone attracted to this, has gone through some period of going, yeah, that's a fact. That is not what my interest is in life. That may not be for you individually, but this kind of fuck materialism, down materialism, is insanity. It's not really insanity, you know that. It doesn't really come up to the necessary even jumpstart level of intelligence, though. Materialism is visible progress. Materialism is progress to over 99% of the world's population at any moment in the lifeline of humanity. That's it. What else is there? What other way can you judge progress at the primary level other than materialism? What is progress? I want to live longer. I want to be healthier while I am alive. I want to have sex available. I want to have sex that is clean and wholesome and won't get me killed and my willy fall off, or line of humanity. That's it. What else is there? What other way can you judge progress at the primary level other than materialism? What is progress? I want to live longer. I want to be healthier while I am alive. I want to have sex available. I want to have sex that is clean and wholesome and won't get me killed and my willy fall off, or I want to have housing for me and mine, for my children. I want to be somewhere where the elements will not drive us nuts. I'd like to be able to replace my tin roof with something that would perhaps be a little less acoustically offensive when it hails. That is it. I assure you that if I'll speak as though your genetic forefathers, from their attitude, they're kind of heroes of the Confuciuses and the Moseses and the Buddhas and the Jesuses and all that stuff. All of those guys would have been right in favor of, hey, could we go somewhere where it's not so noisy tonight? Could I find a room here to sleep where the wind's not blowing on me all night? Could we have some food that was warmed up? The cry of downward materialism, or this is in some way inimical to real progress, I'm not going to holler it's insanity anymore. It's just exceedingly common. It is primitive intelligence. That is your popular artistic extent to have any feeling of affinity for denunciations of materialism. That is the primary level, that is the evolution of humanity, not you individually. But I want you to see that kind of general criticism that life has wired up people to make, to decry materialism, anybody that still vibrates to that, anybody will hear that and go, yeah, that's true. Jesus, give yourself a break. Or, better yet, give yourself a poke in the eye. Were it not for everybody, as you would call it, out there running the good rat race, seeking material gain, where would we all be? Now, we could all be in Bulgaria or Alabama, still chasing our own tails. And of course, still having tails, some of you. To be more complex, you have got to first no longer be a critic, which is just cementing a lower level of evolution, of intellectual development, to cease being a critic of the real overall general movement of life, which is material. Then you can begin to apply some interest into me individually, to realize that the very thing that made you think you were attracted to such activity as this is that it was not in the mainstream. And some of the jokes I make periodically about what a useless activity it is. You know, for no particular reason people do this. It is only back at the more primitive level that people have continued to pursue kinds of more primitive reflections of this, such as in religions and cults and philosophies and etc. But it's on the basis that there is a premise to it. Because there's a payoff to it, and if of course there's a payoff, you've got to have a premise. There has to be an initial starting point, an assumption, so that the conclusions may follow. And then I make the little passing jokes about this, that it has no premise. Of course, it sounds like it does at times. It's the only way you can start talking. But any time that you still believe it has a premise, remember this, you are now not the visiting filmmaker from the more advanced country. You are now the one squatting on the ground, scratching your head, while the more advanced one says, oh, don't be like me, don't be like me. And you're going, which of course, if he was more advanced, he doesn't have to tell you, don't be like me. You just sitting there scratching your head is proof positive there's no doubt no danger that you're going to be. As long as you cannot see that all ordinary progress is material, and then see that the possibility of doing this has nothing to do, as much as I can say that, and the tape running out, of course it does have something to do, but has nothing to do with primary activities. But it is not in conflict with materialism. It is not in conflict with any kind of advancement made in the visible world. And as long as you are letting your own nervous system expend any kind of energy criticizing it, agreeing with those who criticize it, opposing it, you're wasting time. Which is a hobby within itself. No, I don't care. Nothing bad is going to happen to you. I'm not here to denounce wasting time. But you're wasting time. You're wasting energy, which nothing bad will happen to you if you waste energy. So I don't want you to think I said that. But you're wasting energy. All right, I'll put it to you another way. If you're doing that, you're not doing this. And of course, if you don't do this, nothing bad is going to happen to you. I want to make that clear. Of course, it's also sneaks up and almost wants to be verbally clear to say, well, conversely, if you do this, nothing good is going to happen to you. No. Well, all right, I could go this far. You could, no. All of you know this much, without me holding out any promise or conclusion or argument based upon a premise, which the only premise of this should be, remember, we ain't got no premise. That's the only one. But regardless of that, all of you that's been around this truly for any length of time, understand that the more complex you operate, the way in which you think, the more complex you are, the more enriched you are, but the more complex you are, the more fun it is to be alive. And it doesn't have to do with, although it's not in opposition to, but it doesn't have to be that your eating habits become more complex. That you can now stand anchovies on a pizza. And it does not mean that you have now taken up sexual activities that even the Kama Sutra never even dreamed of. It doesn't mean that you now live in structures that would make a geodesic dome look like a tar paper shack in Mississippi. No. In other words, the primary the primary activities and needs of man may not apparently be that directly affected, but only you know that by being more complex, life is more fun. But it's more fun on the invisible level. It's more fun on the more advanced level. It's more fun here. That's the only place it's more fun. That's the only place any proper dream of freedom occurs. And this is the only place of any consequence to somebody like you should be that total captivity occurs. Because you can be totally captive physically, if we're going to divide it that way, which we all are. We're captive to gravity. We're captive to the number of years the average person is going to live. You're captive to the kinds of other organisms, of bacteria and viruses that are fighting for your attention. Ha ha ha. And here is where you have got to not be totally captive. It's in here where you dream of freedom. It is in here that you can be more complex, because there are limits to trying to be more complex in what would seem to be the visible world, that is fooling with the primary aspects of life, of sex, eating, physical comfort. There are limits to how complex you can make it, how much more you can enrich it. It's only here. Well, TGIF, how about I better not tell you that version. Happy weekend.